On this very sad morning, because of the death of Jose Fernandez, we are following that story closely, and if there are new developments in the death of him and his two friends on that boating accident, we will get you back to that story immediately.
You know, 37 days from now, early voting begins, and the focus has been on the candidates for the election, but there are also big issues to decide.
Are there ever? And one of those issues is whether to legalize medical marijuana in the state of Florida. It is back on the ballot as Amendment 2 on the November 8th ballot. In 2014, the medical marijuana question fell short of passing by just 2% of the vote. Supporters say science proves marijuana helps ease the suffering of people who are afflicted by a variety of diseases and chronic conditions, but opponents call the ballot question dangerous, ill-conceived, and the wrong place in the state constitution.
We begin right there with our guests. Dr. Jessica Spencer from the No on 2 campaign has 2 decades of experience in substance abuse prevention. She is strongly opposed to legalizing medical marijuana in Florida. Ben Potlara is the campaign manager for United for Care. That's the organization behind the medical marijuana ballot initiative. And we thank you both for being with us this morning, coming in to talk about all this.
Thank you for having us.
Ben Potlara, what is, in your view, the best reason for voters to vote yes on Amendment 2?
Medical decisions should be kept between a doctor and their patient, and we trust our doctors. We trust them to prescribe much more dangerous narcotics than marijuana. We're talking about opiates, benzodiazepines, and marijuana is relatively safe in the grand scheme of the pharmacopoeia.
It's not approved by the FDA.
It's not approved by the FDA, but in thousands of years of human civilization, we know that marijuana is not lethal and relatively safe and benign in terms of the pharmaceuticals that we have out there. 25 other states plus Washington, D.C. have medical marijuana, and there's no reason that we should criminalize doctor-patient decisions in the state of Florida.
You know, as long as we're doing this sort of a debate style opening statement, I suppose, Dr. Spencer, what is the frame the opposition for us against this amendment?
Well, the major issues are that it doesn't belong in our Constitution. We already have laws here in the state of Florida that allow people to make that choice with their doctor if they so choose. When you put it in the Constitution, there really isn't anything that we can do about it. The other issue is the way it's written and would be in our Constitution. It's wide open for anyone to get marijuana for any reason they want because they have this or other conditions set left in there. And we're also talking about smokable, we're talking about oils, we're talking about edibles, where unfortunately in other states with these edibles, we are seeing more and more that people are accidentally ingesting them and over-ingesting them. And unfortunately, this is a drug that is causing deaths. It's causing cardiac arrhythmias due to cannabis overdose and a myriad of other problems.
How often, you're talking about cardiac arrhythmia, other side effects, ill side effects, how often in the greater scale of things do these side effects occur?
Unfortunately, more often than we would like, and when we would think
100
about
heart attacks, I mean, how many are caused by
Nobody has ever died from an overdose of marijuana.
That's the question.
They actually have, if you look at PubMed, and that's exactly the reason is from these cannabis overdoses. Do I have an exact number? No, sir, I don't.
Okay.
But a PubMed search will have those.
So
I have an exact number. It is 0.
The opposition's framing of the argument is it's too vague, is sort of like the headline. Ben Potlara, the 2014 amendment as it was written, that was also a criticism. What is different 2 years later? What is in this amendment that was not there in 2014 that missed passing by just 2%?
Sure.
And I remember then you had talked about, well, we're going to go back, we're going to look at it, tighten it up. What's the difference?
And we did, and I think all the criticisms that the No campaign brought up last time, the supposed loopholes that were in the amendment, were addressed in the second draft and in this iteration of the constitutional amendment.
Which were what?
Which were, first of all, we tightened up the definition of debilitating medical condition. It doesn't read or other conditions. It reads or other debilitating medical conditions of a similar kind or class as or comparable to those enumerated. And those enumerated are HIV, AIDS, epilepsy, Crohn's disease, Parkinson's disease. We put parental consent in there at the doctor-patient level. Before a physician issues a physician certification to a minor, they must get written parental consent. The Department of Health must also verify that written parental consent. The Florida Department of Health has additional authority and oversight to regulate caregivers, which was the subject of one of the opposition's ads in 2014. And we have significantly narrowed and strengthened the immunity offered to make it clear that This does not grant immunity to people under this law for acts of malpractice, negligence, and it is only for the very narrow acts authorized under the
Can I
amendment.
just read what you went through that almost verbatim? I'm looking at the actual
I wrote this.
petition form. Okay, so you know this well. But what it says, which a physician believes, talking about the enumerating of the diseases, which a physician believes the medical use of marijuana would likely outweigh the potential health risks for a patient. Jessica Spencer, that is the opening, is it not?
It is the opening, and that's the thing. You know, we had 2 other states in the United States that did this by ballot initiative, and they had the wherewithal and the responsibility to
There's been
actually
about
put a
a dozen
period.
states that have done ballot initiatives.
Here we go.
Hold on, Ben.
She's just misstating the facts.
Hold on. We'll let you
No, by
correct it if
ballot
it's a-
initiatives. By ballot initiatives, we have Colorado and Nevada. They put a period at the end of their sentence when they listed out those conditions. And then they went on to say, by a governing body of medical professionals could then go in and add other conditions or take away. Not this time. You're exactly right. They've opened it for a single physician, much like we saw with the pill mills, and we're talking about these overprescribed medications, a single physician going in and making decisions. And you can base them on symptomology of the conditions listed because of the way it's written.
But what is the difference with that, with any other physician doing anything right now with any other drug? Isn't it up to a physician to decide where that drug is applicable?
Exactly, and at least when they are approved through years and years and thousands of pages of science, we know what the predictable known side effects are, and we know what the ingredients are, and we know when to take it and how to take it. This, we don't. There are many, many different side effects that are unpredictable depending on the person. There's over 500 chemicals in this one plant. We don't know when to take it, we don't know how to take it, we don't know how it's dosed, it's not titrated. Totally different than when we're dealing with our pharmacopoeia.
So right now, then, something like Charlotte's Web, which is legal in Florida. Florida has medical marijuana in some cases. What's the difference in your mind?
The difference is the law right now, first of all, does not allow many people to qualify for medical marijuana. And if they do qualify, the medical marijuana that they get does not have the active chemical components.
THC.
The THC, which is what is attributed to getting you high, is also one of the great medicinal values of marijuana. It's what has pain relief properties, appetite stimulation properties, anti-nausea, anti-inflammation, and it simply doesn't exist under this current law.
Ben Pollara, let me ask you, as you are well aware, 5 former Florida Supreme Court justices wrote an op-ed in the Tampa Bay Times the other day, and one of the things they said, I'm going to quote it, is, if we enshrine Amendment 2 in the Florida Constitution, the people of Florida will forfeit their ability to legislatively improve the law and to address the inevitable unintended consequences. I mean, the point obviously is, once you put it in the Constitution, you can't say, oh, we need to amend this or change that. It's there, and either it's there or you rescind it.
Yeah, well, you can rescind it, and we've certainly had an example of that with the bullet train back in the early aughts. So it is possible. We also have a constitutional convention coming up where we can amend the Constitution. It's not impossible to amend it.
It should be difficult.
But the other thing is, listen, 25 states plus D.C. have done this. Not a single one has repealed their medical marijuana law. And what this law does is legalizes medical marijuana in that doctor-patient relationship. It prescribes certain things to the state, but by and large, the state legislature and the State Department of Health has a great degree of authority in terms of regulating this amendment. And the people of Florida want it.
Which is exactly opposite of what the justices explain.
Well, 58% said 4 years ago they want it. It remains to be seen if at least 60% want it. That will be decided November 8th. Dr. Spencer, let me ask you something. Dr. Jocelyn Elders, who was then the Surgeon General, wrote this a couple of years ago. The evidence is overwhelming that marijuana can relieve certain types of pain, nausea, vomiting, other symptoms caused by such illnesses as multiple sclerosis, cancer, and AIDS, and it can do so with remarkable safety. I mean, from the Surgeon General of the United States to say this is an efficacious, good treatment for some people. How do you argue with that?
I think we go back to how we derive medications. We're not, I've used this phrase before, we're not Neanderthals, we're not in the 18th century, we have science available to us. And if we go on and read...
She looked at the science and said, yeah,
precisely.
It's got some value.
Right. This is not science. This constitutional amendment is not science, this is not how we do medicine. So although there may be these wonderful things about either the marijuana plant or the oak tree, there's still a way that we derive our medications, and this is not how we do it.
Let's take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to pick up the conversation from here. And of course, we are also following developments in that horrible, fatal boating crash. Marlins pitcher Jose Fernandez and 2 of his friends. We will have all of that when we come right back. We thank you for being with us, staying with us. Of course, we are following the death of Marlins pitcher Jose Fernandez in the boating accident overnight. We now know that the Marlins are preparing to hold a press conference coming up at 12:30. We will be right here to bring that to you. Right now, we are talking to Jessica Spencer and Ben Pollara about the debate of Amendment number 2, the medical marijuana debate that will be on your Florida ballot.
It will, and maybe you have gotten this at your home. I don't know if you can see this with a close-up, but this is a mailer that I received here at the office the other day from No on 2, and it is slick, and it has several pages, and it is arguing against voting for the legalization, but it's got some strange stuff here, Jessica. You know, bud tenders will replace pharmacists, and here's a tattooed lady who is prescribing or showing a prospective customer medical marijuana.
Right.
You know, frankly, I've got to say, this seems only a step removed from Reefer Madness, the movie of the 1930s or 40s that wanted to warn kids, don't try marijuana.
Exactly. Yeah, I wish it was, but unfortunately, and that's a 420 nurse, but a bud tender is someone that is in these dispensaries. It's not a pharmacist. You don't get a prescription and then go to your local pharmacy. You actually get a recommendation and have to go to these pot shops where the 420 nurses and the bud tenders live. And
yeah. All right, well,
that's where they work.
Let's talk about that, because those are going to be, am I wrong, these are going to be licensed people, licensed by the state, chosen
Correct.
by the state. I don't remember the number, forgive me, 1,200 licenses.
That was just an estimate.
An estimate. So what is the license going to be then the protection against everything that Dr. Spencer is bringing up as concerning?
I don't know that there's any license the state could issue that can protect against white guys with dreadlocks, which is the kind of scare tactic that they're trying.
What does that mean, though?
That's the scare tactic that they're trying to perpetrate out there, right? It's that you know, it's that these hippies are going to be selling us marijuana, right? And that's what they want us to be scared about. But the people of Florida are smarter than that, and they realize that this is about medical marijuana. This is not about Cheech and Chong. It's not about reefer madness. It's about helping sick and suffering people. It's about the sanctity of the doctor-patient relationship, and that's why you know, Jessica's scare tactics are not going to work with the people of Florida.
Okay, and I will say, as someone with no horse in the race, the common sense here is really hard to draw out of the scare tactics. But let's go back to licensing. How is that licensing going to be done, and will anyone be able to qualify for a license? What do they have to do to get one?
Well, we can, first of all, it'll be up to the Department of Health and the Florida legislature to determine exactly what the licensing process is going to be. Right now, as a guide for what it might look like, we have what's gone on with the Charlotte's Web legislation. And what licensing looks like under that law is very, very strict. I mean, there are significant background requirements, financial requirements. You know, it's basically, currently, no small businesses can even get into this because it is such a gigantic financial requirement. There's a $5 million bond, $120,000 every 2-year application fee. I mean, this is a very, very strictly run business as it currently stands, and that's the guide that we have for how the state would implement this.
Jessica Spencer, that sounds like licensing to you?
That sounds like licensing. What will actually happen is nothing like that, because again, we can only enact laws that are congruent with the plain language of the text. And once we go beyond that, we are now doing unconstitutional things, and our Supreme Court justices have said that. The other issue, too, is when we say reefer madness and Cheech and Chong, I wish we were talking about reefer madness and Cheech and Chong weed, but we're not. We are talking about marijuana and marijuana products that are 10 to 20 times more potent than they were back in the 1960s and 70s. We're not talking about this low-grade marijuana where people just got a little bit high. We are talking about highly potent products and raw herbal material that will be sold here.
You know, Jessica, I have to say, I heard many of these same arguments made in Colorado before the voters there approved a general use of marijuana, just not medical marijuana. You know, the argument was it will be the end of civilization as we know it. People are going to go get high. Kids are going to drop out of school. It will be, you know, the gateway drug to heroin and other awful things.
Sure.
And generally speaking, that has not happened.
Unfortunately, it has, though, and in Denver itself is 74%. The marijuana usage by students in Denver is 74% higher than the national average.
Whose stats are those? I saw different stats.
Everyone sees different stats.
Well, where are yours from?
These are from the Rocky Mountain HIDA report. These are from the
what?
Department Rocky Mountain HIDA. That's the high intensity drug trafficking. These are from the Board of Education. These are what they're seeing in their schools. They're seeing increased the children selling, children using. But again, Colorado has recreational. You bring up a really good point. The best state to go and look at, and because Florida voters are smart enough to go and look at this and look at California, which is a medical marijuana only state, and look at what these dispensaries look like and the products look like.
Can I tell a little personal anecdote here? A couple of years ago,
Yeah.
my wife and I were walking down the boardwalk in Venice, California, and this young couple, maybe 18 or 19, are standing in front of a medical marijuana dispensary, and this young lady said to me, I'll never forget it, "Save the whale, inhale." And I said, "What does that mean?" And
heavens.
she said, "Oh, if you're anxious, if you're not feeling real good, a doctor is on duty for $180. Go in there, he'll write you a script for marijuana, and then you can buy it right there."
And that's not a recreational
and that is
state.
simply not how it works under this constitutional amendment. As Jessica likes to say, the plain language of the amendment says very clearly that there is a multi-step process to become a legal medical marijuana patient in the state, which first involves being diagnosed with a debilitating medical condition and receiving a physician certification from your doctor, taking that document to the State Department of Health.
So
and
the safeguards are built in?
And being issued an ID card. So there's a multi-step process that involves the State Department of Health and a government-issued ID card that must occur before you're a legal medical marijuana user. Doesn't matter what your doctor says, until you've got that card in your hand, you're not legal. And so what you just described in Venice can never happen in Florida under the plain language of this constitutional amendment.
It will absolutely happen because so I have to wait for a piece of paper that tells me I can go buy pot. That's nothing. That doesn't mean that you still can't walk in and you're still going to see exactly what you saw in Venice here in the state of Florida.
It means that
it's common sense.
And the Rick Scott Department of Health has now said twice, the multi-step process under the constitutional amendment would obviate any sort of pill mill type scenario under this law. And we did that purposely. We wrote this in 2013 initially, right out as the state was coming out of the pill mill crisis, and we wanted to make sure exactly the scare tactic that Jessica keeps bringing up could not happen under the law. It cannot.
All right. That's going to be the final word, although the final word will be made by voters when we get the results November 8th on the evening. But Jessica Spencer, thanks
Thank you
very much.
So much.
Jen
Appreciate
Pilar,
it.
good to see you again.
All right. We after the break, we absolutely will be following the story of the day, a horrific boating accident that killed Marlins pitcher Jose Fernandez and 2 of his friends. The roundtable is next. We will talk about unrest in Charlotte as well, the big debate, and so much more on the plate. Please do stay with us.
Welcome back. It is time for that closer, more analytical look at the week's top news stories. Get some informed opinions from our Powerhouse Roundtable. Boy, we've got a good one for you today. That's Billy Corbin. He is a Miami-based documentary filmmaker. He directed, produced with his colleagues Cocaine Cowboys, the You and Dog Fight.
H.D. Smith is a Miami attorney, a law professor at Florida International University, and a longtime civil rights leader right here in South Florida. And joining us for the first time, but no stranger to South Florida politics or television, is Jessica Fernandez. She's the president of the Miami Young Republicans and was a delegate at the recent GOP convention in Cleveland. Welcome.
Well, thank you for having me.
Jessica, great to have you come in. H.T. Billy Corbin, you heard this little debate that preceded you here on medical marijuana. What's your opinion here? I mean, you got 58% yes 4 years ago. I see it passing, but there are some problems.
I think simply put, if you are a conservative Floridian, if you're concerned about smaller, less invasive government, if you're concerned about creating jobs and stimulating the economy, you absolutely have to vote yes on Amendment 2. There's nothing else any governor or any state can do with one fell swoop to create more jobs and opportunity. You look at all the industries in Colorado. There are our industries here: tourism, medicine, agriculture, conventions, retail space and real estate. There are so many opportunities that will come from this, and more importantly, minimizing the amount of money we spend privatizing prisons and sending otherwise nonviolent and innocent Americans away for doing what? For involving a plant that grows out of the earth that is less dangerous than poison ivy, alcohol, and cigarettes. I think Florida, the young lady who was here earlier was right. Floridians and Florida voters are smart enough to know it's time to vote yes on 2.
It's interesting that you've tied in the medical marijuana argument with the prison argument and criminal justice. H.T. Smith, the lawyer among us, is there a correlation there, do you think?
Oh, absolutely. We have far too many people who are in jail for crimes involving marijuana and other drugs that have nothing to do with violence or anything that's harmful to the community. I served on the Constitution Revision Commission in 1997 and 98. My initial concern was that this shouldn't be in the Constitution, but when the legislature won't act and you have more than a majority of the people that want something, this is the only way they can do it. Yeah. And we know it's more than a majority because in 2014, 57.62% of people voted yes. But I like the fact that it takes 60% to change the constitutions so we have a bigger consensus around that.
Jessica, I see you shaking your head. You are the youngest member of this group, and we're so glad you're here.
I don't know. Should we take a poll? I'm not sure about that.
Saw me in half and count the rings. We'll figure it out.
No, I mean, I think it's time for Florida to enact some common sense rules and regulations regarding marijuana, as our panelists, just suggested. Our prisons are overrun with nonviolent, small amount of drug offenses, and I think it's time for us to see, this be decriminalized. Not only that, but doctors and the Florida legislature has classified this as a medical use plant. And so we need to respect the medical community, and I'm not saying that there are not some challenges and there's not some problems that I see, but just with anything, I think we're tracking towards the right direction. I think the polls show this over 70%. I think it's very poised to win in November, and I hope that we can enact some common sense regulation around it to prevent children and adolescents from having access to this unnecessarily.
We didn't get to talk about in the last segment you had put up this flyer. One of the things the flyer said was Amendment 2 will bring kid-friendly pot candy to Florida, and it cites a couple of headlines where that has happened. What does anyone know what pot candy is, and what are the concerns there? So
sometimes they manufacture the oil into a lollipop, and it looks very benign. It looks exactly, it tastes like a lollipop. I haven't tried
as medicine.
Yes, as medicine, but it looks like a lollipop, strawberry, cotton candy flavor. It can be a myriad of these flavors that are attractive to children. So I think that we need to be concerned with that. And I think that we need to make sure that this is not going into the wrong hands, that this is not laying out on somebody's counter table, with the rest of their medication, and this accidentally get ingested by a child.
But let's be clear, this has not created an epidemic anywhere.
Correct.
In the state of Florida, where we had 7 people a day dying as a result of the oxy epidemic, and the state of Florida did little or nothing for months or years at a time. This is an issue that we should regulate, and that's important to keep drugs out of the hands, or marijuana out of the hands of children. But let's be real about where this kind of lies in the grand scheme of things.
And one of the improvements that has been made, it is now clear that minors cannot get a prescription without parental consent. And the other thing I like is that doctors who negligently prescribe the medication can in fact be sued for medical malpractice.
All right.
That's going to cut down on some of the marijuana mills.
Thank you.